Hello, boys and girls. I'm your Peter Pan storyteller.
This is the story of The Last Starfighter.
This is the story of Gremlins.
This is the story of Tron.
This is the story of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
This is the story of The Empire Strikes Back.
You can read along with me in your book.
You can follow the story along with me.
Every time you hear this sound,
Turn the pages when you hear this sound.
You will know it is time to turn the page when you hear the computer sound like this.
Let's begin now.
Asteroids around me don't know where to run. I'm somewhere between the moon and the sun. I'm in command of 3 ships and there's more on the way. I'm a space cadet, I can really play hyperspace. Push on the button and I'm back in the race.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of When You Hear This Sound, brought to you by the Space Monkey X Audio Workshop. This is your host, Rob Lamley. When you look at video games today, it's hard to imagine that a game built around shooting rocks in space would have taken the world by storm. And yet Asteroids, released by Atari in 1979, did just that. Asteroids was the creation of Atari employees Lyle Raines and Ed Logg. Raines, an executive at Atari, thought the combination of the space-based physics and combat of Computer Space, one of the very first arcade games on the market in 1971, and the need to complete all of a certain task, like destroying all the alien ships in 1978 Space Invaders, would make for an addicting video game. Logg, a developer who had previously worked on Super Breakout, was chosen to take on the project. Logg took an existing game that had never been completed called Planet Grab, which featured a giant, indestructible asteroid that beta test players kept trying to shoot at anyway, and tweaked the code to allow the asteroid to break up after being hit. Logg made it so that the big rock broke into smaller rocks that had to be destroyed by the player. All the while, flying saucers would glide across the screen and fire at your ship, meaning you had to avoid enemy fire while also dodging ever more rocks in space. And just like that, Asteroids was born. Asteroids was designed as vector graphics, meaning an electron beam draws the lines on the surface of the CRT screen, rather than being displayed as part of a grid of glowing pixels. This allowed the images to be clear and sharp as well as precise, something that Logg felt would be necessary for players to line up their shots at the ever smaller pieces of rock. The technique was first used for Atari's game Lunar Lander, released earlier that same year. The game was released in November 1979 and instantly became a massive hit. In all, Atari shipped over 56,000 coin-operated arcade machines, bringing in over $150 million in sales, equal to about $500 million today. Arcade operators found that the game was so popular, they had to install larger coin boxes to handle the number of quarters that addicted players were pumping in. It's estimated that owners of Asteroids machines raked in over $500 million in sales, or about $1.8 billion in today's money. In 1982, Kid Stuff Records released a series of read-along record books and LP audio dramas based on some of Atari's hottest games. Unlike many of today's games, these early video games didn't necessarily have stories per se, so Kid Stuff was free to invent their own plotlines using the various gameplay mechanics as inspiration. The read-along record books included adaptations of 1976's Breakout, 1979's Asteroids, Missile Command and Star Raiders from 1980, and 1982's classic Yar's Revenge. The LP adventures, which were completely different, longer stories from their read-along record book counterparts, included Asteroids, Missile Command, and Yar's Revenge. The Atari LPs are highly sought after by collectors today. I think part of the appeal is the huge Atari game box artwork on the covers, as well as the early synth music soundtracks that Kid Stuff often employed. These albums typically go for anywhere between $30 and $60 on eBay, which is quite a lot for a kid's record. Today's record is the read-along record book version of Asteroids, featuring the adventures of Captain John Strohmeyer of the Outer Quadrant Recon Patrol, who was investigating the disappearance of a robot-controlled United Federation mining ship. Yes, eventually space rocks and spaceships come into play. The record is filled with silly sci-fi nonsense words like photon torpedoes, magnetic bubble memories, and neuron ray blasters, which makes for a fun few minutes of entertainment. As usual, I've scanned in the record book for this album, so be sure to check it out in the show notes over at spacemonkeyx.net. Most of the book is made up of 2-page spreads, so the PDF is formatted to give you the full Asteroids experience. And with that, let's get to the record. Here is 1982's The Story of Asteroids by Kid Stuff Records. Enjoy.
This is your Atari Asteroids read-along book. Every time you hear this sound, it means it's time to turn the page. Now we are ready to begin. Open your book, and we will start our story. And remember, When you hear the sound, turn the page. Recon Base, this is Strohmeyer. I entered the Nexus A Galaxy T plus 30, and I'm getting a stronger signal from the UFM carrier now. Cynthia is still in a down mode, and I can't seem to get her back. Any ideas? Out? For the record, the name's Strohmeyer. Captain John Strohmeyer of the Outer Quadrant Recon Patrol. Base, you're still breaking up. I'm receiving 0. Try your high gain next transmission. Out. The signal was coming from an unmanned robot ore carrier. It was on its way from United Federated Mining Operation 6 to a mid-galaxies processing dump when it dropped off the screen in the company home office. Then something triggered its secret emergency code transmitter. Recon Patrol only has subgalactic responsibilities. Cosmic Space Patrol handles all the really hot stuff, even in our quadrant. So piloting a piece of junk, checking up on somebody's lost load of rocks didn't exactly give me a cause to break out in a sweat. Base, this is Strohmeyer. Firing forward retros at this time. You wouldn't send your mother-in-law up in an RPC-60. It's an outdated scout ship of 2050 vintage, powered by 2 old ion rocket engines. Gas decay boosters were added later on, just in case, but they'd probably tear the ship apart if you used them full throttle. Base, retro firing completed. I'm now at operational velocity and closing target area. Signal still strong. Out. My co-pilot Cynthia was a female of the gender simulation series of binary hybrid computers. She went haywire on me just 90 light days into the mission. The new RPC-60A4S, like Cosmic Space Patrol flies, have computers with magnetic bubble memories. You can take them home to Mother. The RPC-60A4S also have hyperspace shields and carry photon torpedoes. I was armed with a single multi-phase laser cannon. I gave it one more try with Cynthia and managed to kick off her 60-second burnout alarm and couldn't get her offline in time, so she went out for good. She was only a computer, but I felt lonely and scared. I had started wondering what set off that signal on the ore carrier. I began hoping there was a Cosmic Space Patrol ship in the area for backup. I watched Lydian 31, a dying dwarf star glowing dull red and ringed by a vast asteroid belt, draw closer. It almost filled the window in front of me. Recon Base, this is Strohmeyer, attempting to activate UFM carrier's transponder for final fix at this time. There was nothing but garbage coming back from base. I punched in the sequencing for transmission to the transponder on board the ore carrier. Base, sending now. The transponder's return was immediate and powerful, almost knocking me out of my seat. It pulsated insistently in the cabin, joining the emergency signal. As I entered the plane of the asteroid belt, I switched on the asteroid detection scanner and locked in the preset on the warning responder. Whenever an asteroid is on collision approach, the ship's internal navigation computer automatically alters course, making the asteroid a go-by. That's if everything is routine, which it was, until the responder klaxon ripped through my nerves. An asteroid shower dead ahead. I grabbed the controls and kicked in partial booster, taking evasive action. But the asteroids went with me. Something was controlling them. Then, zap! They were vaporized in a searing, blinding flash by a photon torpedo. I jerked my head around, and there, 90 degrees off my port side, was Cosmic Space Patrol. That RPC-60A4 sure looked good. She slipped in beside me, and I gave the pilot a grateful thumbs up. He pointed to something in the distance. The transponder signal had increased, faster and stronger, indicating the ore carrier wasn't too far off. Then I saw her too. The red glow from the star reflected for a moment off the bow of her alloy skin. She was half hidden in the shadow of a large asteroid, moving right along with it. Recon Base, this is Strohmeyer. I have CPS backup at this time. Visual contact with the UFM ore carrier established. Locking vector and closing out. I pointed, indicating the ore carrier. CPS pilot gave me a thumbs up. As we got closer, I could see that the UFM ore carrier was moored to a docking arm extending from the asteroid. Cut in the side of the asteroid, a large bay door was open on an enormous ore-holding pit. The bay was on blue light, which is why the opening couldn't be spotted from a distance. Conveyors ran from the carrier into the interior of the asteroid. Men wearing ELS suits were working inside. Suddenly, there was a flash of light from inside the door of the asteroid, and my ship was rocked by the concussion from a neuron ray blast off the starboard side. I changed vector quickly, evading 2 more blasts, and returned fire with my multi-phase laser cannon. The CPS ship deflected a blast with its hyperspace shield. Recon base, this is Strohmeyer. We have engaged asteroid pirating operation in a firefight. Will Prize, out. That's when I took a direct hit on the stern quarter of my ship. Pow! I rolled the old RPC-60 over and headed down toward the underside of the asteroid, trying to put the ore carrier between me and the bay door and that neuron ray blaster. At least I was still operational. The CPS ship unloaded covering fire. Another neuron ray blast was wide of the mark, far above me. I could see the bay doors on the asteroid starting to close. The blue lights inside the bay were flashing now, and the men were scurrying about as the conveyors withdrew into the interior. The CPS ship scored a hit on the inside of the bay just before the door closed. I edged my ship closer. The bay door was shut, and the ore carrier had been released from its docking arm and was floating free. Then the carrier exploded, suddenly and violently, in a brilliant ball of orange flame and debris. Because I was so close, the compression field from the explosion bowled the RPC-60 over a couple of times and really shook me up. I thought about what it might have done to the ship, that and taking a hit before, and decided to forget about it. I looked around for the CPS ship, but I didn't see it. I was just managing to get things together again when the responder klaxon ruined me for good. The asteroid that had been holding the carrier was on a direct approach vector with me. I altered course and the asteroid moved with me. Asteroids weren't supposed to do that. I swung the ship around toward the onrushing asteroid and let go with the laser cannon for all it was worth. And that wasn't much. It just shifted some gravel around. And by this time, the asteroid was right on top of me. So I shoved the boosters over to full throttle, held on, and prayed everything would hold together. Nothing happened. I was helpless, drifting without power. Was it the explosion, the hit, or both? Then, 1, 2, 3, boom! The CPS ship laid in a series of rapid-fire photon torpedoes, and that asteroid started to open up like a ripe melon. There was a whole ore refining complex and pirate command center inside it. Then another series of torpedoes hit it, and boom! That asteroid came apart in 1,000 pieces. This time, I put up 2 thumbs when the Cosmic Space Patrol ship parked beside me. The pilot just grinned and gave me a tow.
Thanks for stopping by the show today. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. You can head over to spacemonkeyx.net for pictures, links, and additional information about this episode, and check out some of the other podcasts presented by the Space Monkey X Audio Workshop. This has been your host, Rob Lamley. Thanks for listening to When You Hear This Sound, the podcast dedicated to the weird and wonderful world of read-along record books and storybook vinyl. I'll see y'all next time.